The blood on Deanna Norton's hands had dried to a rust-brown stain, and no amount of scrubbing at the pump behind the saloon would wash away the memory of how it got there. She worked the handle with violent jerks, watching the water splash over her raw knuckles while the afternoon sun beat down on Fort Benton, Montana, turning the main street into a ribbon of dust and broken dreams. It was July 1878, and she had just killed a man, not murdered, the sheriff had said. Self-defense, clear as day. But the feel of that iron skillet connecting with her husband's skull, the wet crack of bone, the way he crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, that would live in her bones forever. 3 years of marriage to Frank Norton had taught her that men were creatures of fists and fury. That tenderness was a lie told in storybooks, and that survival meant becoming as hard as the Montana Territory itself. Deanna was 24 years old and had never known a kind touch from any man. She dried her hands on her apron and stared at the little room above the saloon that had been her prison. The sheriff said she was free to go, but where did a woman go in 1878 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a reputation that would follow her like a shadow? The other women in town had already started whispering. She had seen it in their eyes at the general store, the way they pulled their children closer, as if violence were contagious. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider was coming down the main street, sitting tall in the saddle on a gray mare that looked like it had seen better days. The man wore a dusty brown hat pulled low, a faded blue shirt, and leather chaps that had been mended more times than she could count. He dismounted outside the livery stable with an easy grace, patting the mare's neck and speaking to her in low tones Deanna could not hear. She turned back to the pump, not wanting to meet another stranger's eyes. "Excuse me, madam." The voice was quiet, respectful. Deanna's shoulders tensed automatically. She turned to find the rider standing a respectful 10 feet away, hat in his hands. Up close, she could see he was young, maybe 27 or 28, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. There was a gentleness in his face that made her immediately suspicious. "I am looking for work," he said. "Someone at the livery mentioned you might need help, said your husband passed and you have got his freight business to run." Deanna's laugh was bitter. "My husband did not pass. I killed him. And I do not have anything to run. He lost the freight business in a card game 2 months ago." She waited for him to flinch, to make an excuse and leave. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if she had just told him the weather forecast. "I am sorry for your troubles," he said simply. "My name is Vincent Pierce. I am good with horses and wagons, and I am looking for honest work. If you know anyone who might need a hand, I would be grateful for the information." Deanna studied him. There was no judgment in his face, no calculation. Just a weary kind of patience that spoke of long roads traveled. "The Hendersons run freight now," she said finally. "They might need drivers. Their yard is at the end of town near the river." "I thank you kindly." Vincent settled his hat back on his head. He started to turn, then paused. "If you do not mind my asking, what will you do now?" "I do not know," Deanna said, the honesty surprising her. "I have been trying to figure that out." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, "The Hendersons also need someone to manage their books. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it when I asked around yesterday. She said her eyes are going, and her husband cannot read well enough to keep accounts. If you can cipher, it might be work." Deanna could cipher. Her mother had insisted she learn before she died, back when Deanna was 12 and still believed the world might be kind. "Why would you tell me that?" she asked. Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Because everybody deserves a chance to start over. And because you look like you could use some good news." He tipped his hat and walked toward the livery, leaving Diana standing by the pump with something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. She found Vincent again 3 days later at the Henderson freight yard. Diana had gotten the bookkeeping position, and Mrs. Henderson had even offered her a small room in the boarding house they owned, a clean space with a real bed and a window that opened onto the street. It was more kindness than Diana had known in years, and she kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when someone would demand payment she could not give. Vincent was loading crates onto a freight wagon when she arrived for her second day of work. His shirt was soaked with sweat, but he moved with careful precision, making sure each box was secure before adding another. He saw her and nodded a greeting, then went back to his work. Diana settled into the small office Mrs. Henderson had set up for her, spreading out the ledgers and invoices. The previous bookkeeper had made a mess of things, and it took her most of the morning to sort out what was actually owed versus what had been paid. She was deep in calculations when she heard shouting from the yard. Through the window, she saw 2 men confronting Vincent. One of them was Red Jack Mason, a bully who ran with a rough crowd and spent most of his time drinking and looking for fights. The other was his cousin, a weasel-faced man whose name Diana did not know. "You took my job," Red Jack was saying, shoving Vincent in the chest. "Henderson promised me that driving job." Vincent stepped back but did not raise his hands. "I am sorry if there was confusion. Mr. Henderson hired me fair and square. I am sure he could explain it to you." "I do not want explanations. I want what is mine." Red Jack shoved him again, harder this time. Diana found herself moving toward the door before she realized what she was doing. She had seen this before, the way men escalated, the way violence bloomed from nothing. Her hand was on the doorknob when she heard Vincent speak again. "I do not want trouble," he said quietly, "but I need this job. I have been riding for 3 weeks looking for honest work, and I am not going to walk away from it because you are angry." Red Jack's fist came up fast. Vincent could have dodged it. Diana could see that from where she stood. He was quick enough, but instead he took the blow on his shoulder, letting it turn him to the side. He did not hit back. "That make you feel better?" Vincent asked, straightening up. Blood was trickling from his lip where the punch had glanced off his face. "You are not going to fight?" Red Jack seemed genuinely confused. "No," Vincent said. "You want to hit me again, go ahead, but I am not going to hit you back. You have not done anything to me that is worth violence." The moment stretched out, tense and strange. Then Mr. Henderson came around the corner, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "That is enough," the old man said firmly. "Red Jack, you were never promised any job. You showed up drunk the last 3 times I needed a driver, and I told you I would not hire you again. Vincent earned this position fair. Now get off my property before I have the sheriff escort you." Red Jack spat in the dust but left, his cousin trailing behind him. Vincent wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand and returned to loading the wagon as if nothing had happened. Diana went back to her desk, but she could not focus on the numbers. She kept thinking about the way Vincent had stood there, refusing to fight, refusing to let anger dictate his actions. It was the strangest thing she had ever seen a man do. That evening, she found herself walking toward the livery where Vincent had taken a small room in the loft. She told herself she just wanted to make sure he was all right, that it was simple human decency. But the truth was more complicated than that. He was sitting on a barrel outside the livery, cleaning his saddle with neat, careful strokes. The setting sun turned everything gold and amber. "Your lip is swollen," Diana said by way of greeting. Vincent looked up and gave her a lopsided smile that probably hurt. "It will heal." "How was your afternoon with the ledgers?" Confusing. The previous bookkeeper could not add. Diana hesitated, then said, Why did you not fight back? You could have. Vincent set down the saddle soap and rag. My father was a fighting man, he said quietly. Spent his whole life proving he was tougher than whoever was in front of him. Died when I was 16, killed in a brawl over a poker game. I watched my mother cry over his casket and decided right then that I did not want to be that kind of man. Violence just makes more violence. It does not solve anything. Deanna sat down on the bench beside the door, keeping a careful distance between them. Most men do not see it that way. I know, but I am not most men. He met her eyes. And you do not have to be afraid of me. I would never raise a hand to you or any woman. That is a promise. Something in Diana's chest cracked open just a little. I killed my husband, she said abruptly. Did they tell you that? He came home drunk and started hitting me like he always did, but this time I fought back. I hit him with a skillet and he died. Vincent nodded slowly. I heard the story, and I am sorry you had to live through that. No one should have to defend their life from someone who promised to love them. You do not think I am a murderer. I think you are a survivor. Vincent picked up his rag again, going back to work on the saddle. And I think you deserve to have a life where you do not have to be afraid anymore. Deanna sat with those words for a long time, watching the sun sink below the mountains. When she finally stood to leave, Vincent was humming quietly, some tune she did not recognize. It sounded peaceful. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that Deanna had never experienced before. She went to work at the Henderson freight yard every morning, keeping the books and managing the accounts. Vincent drove freight runs to nearby towns, hauling supplies and goods across the Montana territory. Their paths crossed regularly and slowly, carefully, something began to build between them. It started with small things. Vincent would bring her coffee in the morning exactly the way she liked it, with just a touch of sugar. Deanna would make sure his pay was ready on time, no mistakes. They would eat lunch together sometimes, sitting in the shade of the big cottonwood tree in the Henderson yard, talking about everything and nothing. Diana found herself watching for him, listening for the sound of his wagon returning from a run. And Vincent always sought her out when he got back, even if it was just to say hello and ask about her day. One afternoon in late August, Vincent returned from a long haul to Helena looking troubled. Diana was finishing up the accounts when he appeared in her office doorway. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Of course." Deanna set down her pen. Vincent came in and stood awkwardly, turning his hat in his hands. "I heard something in Helena. There is a man asking questions about you. Says his name is Norton, that he was Frank's brother. Says he wants to know what really happened." Deanna's blood went cold. Frank had a brother, apparently. From what I gathered, they were not close, but blood is blood, I suppose. Vincent looked at her steadily. "I wanted you to know so you would not be caught off guard if he shows up." "What did you tell the people asking? The truth?" "That Frank Norton was a brutal man who hurt his wife, and she defended herself. That the sheriff cleared you of any wrongdoing." Vincent took a step closer. "Diana, if this brother causes trouble, you do not have to face him alone. I will stand with you." The casual certainty in his voice made Deanna's throat tight. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you matter. Because I have come to care about you more than I probably should. And because I cannot stand the thought of you being hurt again." Deanna stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "I have never known gentleness from any man," she said, the words coming out raw and honest. "My father left before I could remember him. My husband beat me. Every man I have ever known has been cruel or indifferent or both. I do not know how to trust this, how to trust you." Vincent set his hat on the desk and took both her hands in his grip warm and careful. "Then let me show you," he said quietly. "Every day for as long as it takes." Let me show you what gentle means." Deanna looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumbs brushed softly over her knuckles. It was such a small thing, such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. She had spent so long armored against the world, against pain, against hope. Opening up felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know, but I am patient." Vincent squeezed her hands gently. "I am not going anywhere." Deanna let herself lean into that promise just a little. It was a start. Frank's brother arrived 2 weeks later on a gray September morning when frost was just starting to kiss the ground. Deanna was walking to work when a man stepped out of the hotel and called her name. Deanna Norton. She turned to find a man who looked disturbingly like Frank, same heavy build, same cold eyes. But his clothes were finer, and he carried himself with a kind of authority that Frank had never possessed. "My name is Deanna Norton no longer," she said carefully. "What do you want, Mr. Norton?" "James Norton. I was Frank's brother." He looked her up and down with obvious distaste. "I want to know why you killed him." People on the street were starting to stare. Deanna felt the old panic rising, the urge to run or hide or fight. Then she saw Vincent coming around the corner, saw him take in the situation and start walking faster. "I killed him because he was beating me to death," Deanna said, keeping her voice steady. "The sheriff investigated. It was self-defense." "That is convenient," James Norton said. "Frank always said you were difficult. Maybe you provoked him. Maybe your brother was a violent drunk who enjoyed hurting people weaker than him," Deanna shot back. "Or do you want to pretend that is not true?" James's face darkened. "You watch your mouth, woman." "I have half a mind to bring charges against you myself. Get a proper investigation done." There was a proper investigation. Vincent had arrived, positioning himself slightly between Deanna and James. "And if you try to harass this woman further, I will make sure everyone in Montana territory knows what kind of man your brother really was, including the 3 other women he beat before Deanna." Deanna stared at Vincent. She had not known that. James looked between them, his jaw working. "She got to you too, did she? Turned you against good honest men with her lies. The only lies here are the ones you are telling yourself," Vincent said quietly. "Your brother was not a good man, and Deanna has every right to live her life in peace. Now I suggest you get back on whatever horse brought you here and leave Fort Benton." For a moment, Deanna thought James might throw a punch. His hands were clenched, his face red with anger. But then Sheriff Matthews stepped out of his office across the street, his hand resting casually on his gun belt, and James seemed to reconsider. "This is not over," he said, but there was no real conviction in it. He was already backing down. "Yes, it is," Deanna said firmly. "Your brother is dead and I am alive, and that is how it is going to stay. Go home, James Norton. There is nothing for you here." He left that afternoon, and Deanna watched his stage pull out with a feeling of profound relief. A chapter of her life was finally closing. Vincent walked her home that evening, the 2 of them taking the long way along the river. The cottonwoods were turning gold and the air smelled of autumn and wood smoke. "Thank you," Deanna said, "for standing with me, for what you said. I meant every word." Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her. "Deanna, I know you are still healing. I know you have got years of hurt to work through, but I need you to know that my feelings for you are real. I am in love with you, and I am willing to wait as long as you need, but I wanted you to know the truth." Deanna's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She looked at this man, this gentle, patient, stubborn man who had somehow slipped past all her defenses. He had shown her, day after day, what kindness looked like. He had never pressed, never demanded, never taken more than she was willing to give. He had simply been there, steady as the mountains, constant as the river. "I am afraid I do not know how to love someone," she said. "Frank broke something in me, I think. I do not know if I can be what you need." "You do not have to be anything except yourself," Vincent said. "And for what it is worth, I think you are already learning how to love again. You have just been doing it so carefully I am not sure you noticed." Deanna thought about the way she looked for him every morning, the way his presence made her feel safe, the way she had started imagining a future that included him. Maybe he was right. Maybe love did not have to be the violent, consuming thing Frank had called it. Maybe it could be gentle. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them. Vincent went very still, as if afraid to spook her. "Show me," Deanna said softly. "Show me what gentle means." Vincent raised his hand slowly, telegraphing every movement, and cupped her face with a touch so tender it made her eyes sting. "Like this," he whispered, and kissed her. It was nothing like Frank's brutal, claiming kisses. Vincent's lips were soft, questioning, offering rather than taking. Deanna felt something inside her unfurl, some tight, frightened thing finally daring to relax. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady under her palms. When they finally broke apart, Vincent was smiling at her with such open joy it took her breath away. "I love you," Deanna said, testing out the words. They felt strange and new in her mouth, but not wrong at all. "I do not know when it happened, but I love you, Vincent Pierce." "I am the luckiest man in Montana," Vincent said, and kissed her again. They were married in October, when the aspens were a riot of gold, and the mountains were capped with the first real snow. It was a small ceremony at the church in Fort Benton, with the Hendersons and a few other friends from town. Deanna wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and Vincent wore his best shirt with his hair slicked back. Sheriff Matthews gave Deanna away since she had no family, and the preacher kept the service short and sweet. When Vincent slipped the ring on her finger, his hands were shaking slightly. Deanna squeezed his fingers and saw him smile. The Hendersons gave them the afternoon off and use of the small cabin on the edge of their property. It had been a line shack once, but it had been fixed up with a real bed and a stove and windows with glass. It was not much, but it was theirs. Vincent carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of the room. The laughter faded, replaced by something weightier, more serious. "I have never," Deanna started, then stopped. "Frank, he never cared about whether I wanted to or not. I do not know if I can, if I am ready." Vincent took her hands. "We have got all the time in the world," he said firmly. "This is our wedding night, yes, but that does not mean anything has to happen. We can sleep and talk and just be together. Whatever you need, Deanna. Whatever you are comfortable with." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. "You mean that? I have never been more serious about anything in my life." Vincent squeezed her hands. "You are not a thing to be used. You are my wife, my partner. And that means your comfort and happiness matter more than anything else." Deanna stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face into his shoulder. He held her carefully, his hands rubbing slow circles on her back. They stood like that for a long time, just breathing together. Eventually, Deanna pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I want to try," she said, "but if I ask you to stop, you have to stop." "Immediately," Vincent promised. "Always." That night, Vincent proved again what gentleness meant. He moved slowly, checked in with her constantly, let her set every boundary and pace. When Deanna did ask him to pause, he stopped instantly. No frustration, no pressure, just patient understanding. And when she was ready to continue, he made sure she knew she was cherished, that this was about them together, not about taking. Afterward, Diana lay in his arms feeling more at peace than she could remember in years. Vincent was already half asleep, his breathing deep and even one hand tangled in her hair. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" His voice was drowsy. "For showing me what love is supposed to be." Vincent's arm tightened around her. "Thank you for giving me the chance." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while the Montana night settled in around their little cabin. The years that followed were not perfect. Deanna still had nightmares sometimes, waking up convinced that Frank was standing over her with his fists raised. But Vincent was always there, pulling her close, murmuring reassurances until the fear faded. She learned that not all men were monsters, that safety was possible, that love could be a source of strength rather than pain. Vincent continued working for the Hendersons, eventually becoming their lead driver, and then a partner in the business when Mr. Henderson's health started failing. Deanna managed all the books and accounts, and between the two of them, they helped build the Henderson Freight Company into one of the most reliable operations in Montana Territory. They saved their money carefully and eventually bought a small ranch outside of Fort Benton. Nothing fancy but good land with water access. Vincent built them a house with his own hands, working nights and weekends, making sure every board was straight and every window sealed tight. Deanna planted a garden and bought chickens, creating a home that felt safe and solid. Their first child came in the spring of 1881, a boy they named Samuel after Vincent's father. Vincent cried when he held him for the first time, this tiny scrap of humanity that depended on them completely. "I am going to be so much better than my father was," Vincent whispered, staring down at Samuel's little face. "I am going to show him every day what it means to be gentle." "I know you will," Deanna said, exhausted but happy. "You have been showing me for 3 years now. You will be a wonderful father." And he was. Samuel grew up knowing only kindness from his father, only respect and patience and love. When their daughter Ruth came along 2 years later, Vincent was just as devoted, just as gentle. He taught them both to ride, to handle horses, to treat animals and people with care. Deanna taught them to read and cipher, and together they raised children who understood that strength and gentleness were not opposites, that one could be both tough and tender. The ranch prospered slowly but surely. Vincent proved to have a good eye for horses, and they started breeding quality stock that became known throughout the territory. Deanna kept the books and managed the sales, and their partnership extended from their marriage into every aspect of their lives. One evening in the summer of 1885, they sat on the porch of their house watching Samuel and Ruth play in the yard. Samuel was 4, Ruth 2, both of them running around chasing fireflies in the deepening twilight. Vincent had his arm around Diana's shoulders, and she was leaning into his warmth, peaceful in a way she had once thought impossible. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Deanna asked quietly. "If you had not come to Fort Benton, if we had not met?" "Sometimes," Vincent admitted. "But mostly I just feel grateful. Grateful that I found you, that you gave me a chance, that we built this life together." Deanna turned to look at him, this man who had shown her day after day, year after year, what gentle meant. His face was more lined now, weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were still that same creek water green, still full of kindness. "I love you," she said. "More than I thought I could ever love anyone. You saved me, Vincent Pierce." "No," Vincent said, pulling her closer. "We saved each other. I was just a drifter looking for purpose. You gave me that. You gave me everything." They kissed as the sun sank below the mountains and their children's laughter floated up from the yard. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary life, but it was theirs, built on gentleness and patience and the kind of love that endured. The years continued to pass, each one adding layers to their story. They had one more child, Another girl they named Grace, who came along in 1887 and completed their family. The ranch grew, their reputation for quality horses spreading across Montana and beyond. Vincent became known not just as a good horseman, but as a fair dealer, someone whose word meant something. Diana's skill with numbers and management kept them profitable even in the lean years. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as he loved horses. Ruth was fearless, always climbing trees and exploring the hills, with her father's patience and her mother's determination. Grace was the baby, sweet-tempered and gentle, who seemed to collect every stray animal within 5 miles. Vincent was the kind of father who got down on the floor to play, who answered endless questions with genuine interest, who never raised his voice in anger. Diana watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again, every single day. He had kept his promise to be better than his own father, to show his children what gentleness meant. In 1890, when Montana officially became a state, they celebrated with the whole town. Fort Benton was growing, becoming more civilized with each passing year. The wild frontier days were fading into memory, replaced by schools and churches and proper roads. Diana sometimes thought about the woman she had been back in 1878, broken and afraid, covered in blood. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone she had been in another lifetime. "You miss it?" Vincent asked her one night after the children were in bed. "The person you were before all this, before me?" Diana considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "That woman was surviving, not living. You taught me the difference. You taught me that I deserved to be happy, that I was worth kindness. I would not trade this life for anything." Vincent pulled her into his arms, and they swayed together in the lamplight, dancing to music only they could hear. The years brought challenges, of course. A hard winter in 1893 that killed half their stock. A drought the following summer that dried up the creek and withered the garden. Samuel fell and broke his arm when he was 10, and for 3 terrifying hours, Diana thought they might lose him to infection before the doctor arrived from town. Ruth got thrown from a horse when she was 12 and was knocked unconscious, giving Vincent his first gray hairs from worry. But they weathered it all together, Vincent and Diana, their partnership strong enough to handle whatever came. They learned that love was not just the easy moments but the hard ones too, the times when you had to choose each other over and over again. By 1898, Samuel was 17 and starting to court the schoolteacher's daughter, a sweet girl named Emily who blushed whenever he spoke to her. Ruth was 15 and had declared she wanted to be a veterinarian, much to the shock of everyone except her parents. Grace was 11 and showed signs of inheriting her mother's head for numbers. Vincent and Diana sat on their porch one evening in late summer, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and purple. They were both in their mid-40s now, their youth behind them but their love as strong as ever. 20 years, Diana said softly. "We have been married 20 years this October." "Best 20 years of my life," Vincent said, taking her hand. His fingers still traced gentle patterns on her skin, still treated her like she was precious. "Should we do something special to celebrate?" "Just this," Diana said, squeezing his hand. "Just us here together. That is all I have ever needed." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came after years of knowing someone completely. Diana thought about how far they had come, how much they had built together. The frightened, broken woman who had killed her husband in self-defense was gone, replaced by someone stronger, happier, whole. And the drifting cowboy who had stumbled into Fort Benton looking for work had found a home, a family, a purpose. "I would do it all again," Diana said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every painful memory if it meant ending up here with you." Vincent turned to look at her, his eyes soft with emotion. "I love you, Diana Pierce. I have loved you since the day I saw you at that pump trying to wash away the past, and I will love you until my last breath." "I know," Diana said, and she did. After 20 years of gentleness, of patience, of quiet devotion, she knew it in her bones. "I love you too. Thank you for showing me what gentle meant. Thank you for never giving up on me." "Never," Vincent promised, and kissed her as the stars began to appear overhead. The autumn of 1898 brought the 20th anniversary of their marriage. The children insisted on throwing them a party, inviting half the county to the ranch for a celebration. Diana protested that it was too much fuss, but secretly she was touched by the effort. The day of the party was perfect, cool and crisp with clear blue skies. Tables were set up in the yard, covered with food that neighbors and friends had brought. There was music and dancing, children running everywhere, the sound of laughter echoing off the hills. Vincent and Diana stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by the life they had built, and Diana felt happiness so complete it almost hurt. Sheriff Matthews, now gray-haired and retired, raised a toast. "To Vincent and Diana Pierce, who proved that the best love stories are the ones built on respect and kindness. May you have 20 more years and beyond." "Hear, hear," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Diana looked at Vincent and found him already looking at her, his expression full of love and pride. He held out his hand, and she took it, letting him lead her into a dance in the yard while everyone cheered. "I am the luckiest woman alive," Diana murmured as they swayed together. "No," Vincent said, holding her close. "I am the lucky one. You took a chance on a drifter cowboy with nothing to offer but good intentions. You built this amazing life with me. You gave me children, a home, a reason to be the best man I could be. I am the one who won the prize, Diana." They danced until the sun went down and the lanterns were lit, until the guests started heading home and the children fell asleep on blankets under the stars. And then they sat together on their porch, fingers intertwined, and watched the moon rise over their land. Samuel got married in the spring of 1899 to his Emily, and Vincent cried again, happy tears this time at seeing his son so full of joy. Ruth left for school in the East that same year, determined to pursue her dream of animal medicine despite the obstacles she would face as a woman in that field. Grace started helping more with the ranch books, showing a natural talent for the work that made Diana proud. Vincent and Diana entered their 50s with Grace, their love deepening with each passing year. Vincent's hair went silver, and Diana found new lines around her eyes and mouth, but they still held hands at the dinner table, still kissed each other goodbye when Vincent went into town, still danced in the kitchen when they thought no one was watching. In 1902, Samuel and Emily gave them their first grandchild, a little girl named Caroline. Vincent held her with the same careful tenderness he had shown his own children, tears streaming down his face. Diana watched her husband become a grandfather and fell in love with him all over again. "I never thought I would have this," Diana said that night, lying in bed with her head on Vincent's shoulder. "A family, grandchildren, a future full of joy. When I killed Frank, I thought my life was over. I thought I would always be defined by that moment." "You were never defined by what he forced you to become," Vincent said firmly. "You were always more than that. I just got to be there while you remembered it." Diana kissed him, long and slow and full of gratitude. "Thank you for 24 years of gentleness. Thank you for keeping your promise." "Always," Vincent whispered. "Until my last breath." Ruth came home from school in 1903 with a degree and a fierce determination to open a veterinary practice, despite the prejudice she faced. Vincent and Diana backed her completely, helping her secure a small building in Fort Benton and spreading the word about her skills. She became the first female veterinarian in Montana, and her parents could not have been prouder. Grace met a young man named Thomas Wells at church in 1904, a carpenter with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded Deanna of Vincent. She gave her blessing gladly, and they were married that autumn in a ceremony that filled the house with joy and laughter. By 1905, Vincent and Deanna were in their early 50s and thoroughly settled into the rhythms of their life. The ranch ran smoothly, their children were thriving, and they had 3 grandchildren with more on the way. They had built something lasting, something good. One evening in late summer, they rode out to the highest hill on their property, the place where they could see the mountains in one direction and the sweep of their land in the other. They dismounted and stood together, Vincent's arm around Deanna's waist, both of them quiet in the face of such beauty. "You remember that day I found you at the pump?" Vincent asked softly. "You were trying so hard to be strong to not show how much you were hurting." "I remember. I remember thinking you were going to be like every other man, that you would judge me or try to use me." Deanna leaned into him. "I have never been so happy to be wrong." "I knew that day," Vincent said. "The moment I saw you, something in my chest just said, there she is. The woman I have been looking for my whole life. I did not know your story yet, did not know what you had been through, but I knew you were special." Deanna turned in his arms to face him fully. "You saved my life, Vincent Pierce, not just my physical life, but my soul. You showed me that men could be gentle, that I deserved to be treated with respect and love. You took a broken woman and loved her back to wholeness." "We healed each other," Vincent said, cupping her face in his hands with that same tender care he had always shown. "And we built something beautiful together. This ranch, our children, this life. It has been the greatest adventure of my existence." They kissed as the sun sank lower, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. After 27 years together, it still felt like coming home. The seasons continued their dance, winter into spring, summer into fall, year after year. Vincent and Deanna aged together, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. They became the elder statesmen of Fort Benton, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of what marriage should be. In 1910, they celebrated 32 years of marriage with another party, this one even bigger than the last. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with friends old and new. Sheriff Matthews had passed, but his son gave a toast in his father's memory, speaking of how the old sheriff had always pointed to Vincent and Deanna as proof that good people could find happiness even after tragedy. Vincent stood to speak, his voice still strong despite his 59 years. "I want to thank my wife," he said, looking directly at Deanna. 32 years ago, she took a chance on a cowboy with nothing but a worn-out horse and a promise to treat her gently. She had every reason to say no, every reason to protect her heart. But she was brave enough to try again, to let love in one more time, and because of that bravery, we built this incredible life. Deanna, you are my heart. You always have been and you always will be." There was not a dry eye in the crowd. Deanna stood and went to him, and they kissed while everyone cheered. That night, alone in their bedroom, Deanna sat at her vanity while Vincent brushed out her hair, something he had done almost every night of their marriage. His hands were gentle as always, careful not to pull or tug. "I have been thinking," Deanna said softly, "about the woman I was when we met, about how much I have changed." "You have not changed," Vincent said. "You have just become more yourself. All that strength and courage was always there. You just needed a safe place to let it show." Deanna caught his hand and brought it to her lips. "I wish I could go back and tell her, that frightened woman standing at the pump. I wish I could tell her that it gets better, that she finds happiness, that a gentle man comes along and shows her what love really means. "I wish I could go back and tell that drifting cowboy the same thing," Vincent said. "Tell him that in Fort Benton, Montana, he is going to find everything he has been searching for." They went to bed holding each other as they had every night for 32 years and fell asleep to the sound of each other's breathing. The years rolled on, bringing more grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. Vincent and Deanna grew old together with grace and dignity, their love a constant in a changing world. The automobile came to Fort Benton, and electricity, and telephones. The Wild West they had known faded into history, replaced by a new century with new ways. But through it all, Vincent and Diana remained constants in each other's lives. In the spring of 1915, Vincent fell ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a cough that would not go away, a weariness that settled into his bones. The doctor said his lungs were failing, that at 64 years old and after a lifetime of hard work, his body was simply wearing out. There was nothing to be done except keep him comfortable. Diana refused to accept it at first, railing against the unfairness of it. They had years left, decades. She was not ready to lose him, but Vincent was calm about it, accepting in the way he had always been. "We have had 37 years," he told her gently. 37 years of love and joy and family. That is more than most people get in a lifetime. I have no regrets, Deanna. None except that I have to leave you. Do not talk like that, Deanna said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. You are going to be fine, you have to be fine. But he was not fine. Over the weeks that followed, Vincent grew weaker, spending most of his time in bed. Deanna never left his side, holding his hand, reading to him, just being present. Their children came, and their grandchildren, filling the house with love and memories. On a warm evening in May, with the windows open and the smell of spring blowing through, Vincent called Deanna close. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for every single day." "No," Deanna said, clutching his hand. "Thank you. Thank you for showing me what gentle meant. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for being the best man I have ever known." Vincent smiled, that same gentle smile that had captured her heart 37 years ago. "I love you, Deanna Pierce. Forever." "Forever," Deanna promised and kissed him. Vincent Pierce died that night peacefully, with his wife's hand in his and his children around him. He was 64 years old, and he left behind a legacy of gentleness and love that would ripple through generations. Diana grieved deeply, but she did not break. Vincent had taught her too well, had shown her how strong she really was. She wore black for a year, as was proper, but she also kept living, kept running the ranch, kept being there for her children and grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had come to Fort Benton with nothing but good intentions and changed her entire world. She lived another 15 years after Vincent's death, making it to the age of 74 before her own body finally gave out. In those years, she saw more great-grandchildren born, saw Ruth's veterinary practice flourish, saw Grace's children grow and start families of their own. She kept the ranch running until her last year, refusing to slow down or give up. When Deanna Pierce died in 1930, peacefully in her sleep, the entire town of Fort Benton mourned. She was buried next to Vincent on the hill overlooking their ranch, the place where they had stood together so many times and watched the sun set over the mountains. On her tombstone, beneath her name and dates, their children had carved a single line. "She learned what gentleness meant and taught it to us all." The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down from child to child, grandchild to grandchild. And every person who inherited it heard the story of Vincent and Deanna, the cowboy and the broken woman who found each other in Fort Benton in 1878 and built a love that lasted beyond death. In time, the little cabin where they spent their wedding night was preserved as a family landmark. The house Vincent built with his own hands still stood strong, weathering storms and years. And on the hill overlooking it all, two simple headstones marked the resting place of two people who proved that gentleness was not weakness, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that the best stories were the ones built day by day, moment by moment, with patience and care. Vincent had kept his promise. He had shown Diana what gentle meant every single day for 37 years. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift imaginable, the knowledge that she was worthy of love, that she deserved kindness, that she could be happy. And Diana had given him the same gift in return, teaching him that his gentleness was not a weakness, but a strength, that being different from other men was something to be proud of, that love built on respect and tenderness would outlast any storm. Together, they had created something rare and precious, a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West but timeless in its truth. They had proven that even in the hardest places, even after the worst beginnings, gentleness could flourish, love could grow. And two broken people could heal each other and build a legacy that would echo through generations. Their story became legend in Fort Benton, told and retold until the details blurred and the truth became myth. But the heart of it remained the same. A cowboy came to town looking for honest work, met a woman who had killed to survive, and loved her so gently, so patiently, that she learned to trust again. And together, they built a life worth living, full of children and grandchildren, hard work and laughter, sorrow and joy, and above all, a love that never wavered in the end. That was their legacy. Not the ranch or the money or the business they had built, but the example they set of what love should be. Gentle, patient, kind, strong enough to weather any storm, tender enough to heal any wound. And their descendants carried that lesson forward, generation after generation, teaching their own children that strength and gentleness were not opposites, that true love was built day by day through small acts of kindness, and that everyone deserved to be treated with respect and care. Vincent and Diana Pierce had left this world, but their love remained, carved into the land itself, whispered in the wind that blew across the Montana hills, present in every sunrise that painted the mountains gold. They had lived and loved and built something that would never truly die, because the best things never do. They live on in the stories we tell, the lessons we learn, and the love we pass forward. And somewhere, perhaps, on quiet summer evenings when the light turns amber and the breeze carries the scent of grass and wildflowers, you can still feel them there on that hill, holding hands and watching the sunset, together for all eternity as they had been in life. Two souls who found each other against all odds, and proved that gentleness, in the end, was the strongest force of all.